Welcome to the Franchise Woman Podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged. I'm Rebecca Monet, CEO and Chief Scientist at Zoracle Profiles, along with my co-host, community advocate, speaker, author, and entrepreneur, Tracy Kawa. So we have a very special guest today, my dear friend, Gerry Henley. Gerry is passionate about establishing and helping franchisor leadership teams achieve operational excellence through effective coaching and mentoring. Gerry is the founder of Launch to Growth, FOS, sorry about that, franchise operating system, and he is a ZOR forum moderator. Launch to Growth and FOS help franchisors build scalable franchise systems focusing on unit level performance. Gerry has more than 30 years experience as a strategic, results-driven business development and leadership executive with more than 15 years within the franchise space. Scale to get better before you scale to get bigger is a motto that Gerry lives by. So Gerry, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Nice to be here.
So we were talking beforehand. I've known you many years and you have changed my life in 1,000 different ways. And I want people to see all sides of you, the sides that I've seen over those years and the side that the business world sees. So I want to talk a little bit more about you personally. You are involved in many things, including a men's ministry. Can you tell us a little bit about what got you involved with this, why this is wonderful for you, what drives you to do that?
Well, yeah, it gets pretty simple. And I have enjoyed our friendship immensely over the years. And, God has always put me in positions, and I learned early on to just always say yes and be obedient, say yes, okay. And he had led me to utilize some of my testimony. This might sound a little odd, but I've been through a lot. My testimony, God got me through, by the grace of God, got me through it. I often tell the men that I work with that are struggling a lot that, I've never met a sin that I haven't loved. So I've pretty much done it all, but I kind of do that in a way that they understand where I'm at, that I understand them. I'm unconditional. So I worked for the last, 20 years in group ministry with men, that I work one-on-one with some of the group. Just recently, God moved in my life where I have pastors through some other churches that are referring me. We always laugh that Gerry gets the hard ones, So when they have somebody in really tough shape, they introduce me and we connect, and I walk with them on a one-on-one ministry now. So I don't know. Geez, somebody asked me the other day, how many men have you actually walked with? And it's probably approaching a couple hundred, of God utilizing me to help change their lives. And it always starts with, how's your heart? How's your heart with God? And we got to get that right.
Wow, that's so beautiful. So, Gerry, something that Rebecca mentioned in the intro caught my ear, like better before bigger, or those were the words that I pulled out. Like, what does that mean exactly? Better before bigger.
It's in everything I do, whether it's in the ministry or whether it's in the business world and franchising. It's scale to get better before you scale to get bigger. And too often, especially entrepreneurial-led companies, and everybody's charging to get bigger, and they're not paying attention to the better part. So a lot of times when I get involved, I get in and I say, well, okay, let's establish, here's where you're at, here's where you should be. Okay. Now let's look at that and fix that gap, and that's, I'm a gap fixer. I love, God's blessed me with the ability to go in and dial in on that and come up with the fix. So it's like, hey, before we keep going to get bigger, how about we get where we should be and then worry about scaling? So it's all about reestablishing that ability to scale that can be in the faith of men's ministry. If they aren't, their heart isn't right with God,
Mhm.
oh,
Mhm.
they can keep chasing all this other stuff, but we got to fix that gap. Let's get your heart right with God. And that's a journey that we do. So the same thing in franchise, or as I work with teams and everything else, is exactly the same thing we do.
I think that's an excellent point. This idea of getting better before we get bigger, whether it's our heart, our health, our relationships, our addictions, our poor business skills, whatever it is, it's that same emphasis that you seem to have in all areas of your life, with your men's ministry, and your heart also for children. And I know you and your wife have been undertaking a big venture. You're bolder, more courageous than I would be. But tell us about that also.
Well, it's another God story, so I'll try and do as quick as I can. You can tell me to cut it to the chase more, but my wife and I also teach Sunday school. We're committed to that and have been doing that for a number of years. Through Sunday school, we have a local group home, foster home, that kids started coming to our Sunday school class, and we just immediately bonded with some of them. And this happened right before COVID. And so the only way we could be mentors to them and take them off that campus was to be big brother, big sisters. So we embarked upon that and got approved in February 2020 to be big brothers, big sisters. February 2020. COVID hit, shut everything.
I know that time well.
Big brother shut down everything. It was like, we didn't see these kids for 2 years. So then they started coming back. My wife has an affinity for adoption, fostering. She kept coming to me, and I was pulling the old I card. And I work, man, it says I this, I that, I that. And I'm sick. I'll be 67. I just turned 67. I've already raised 2 adult children, and blah blah, excuse after excuse. And evidently, I found out later that she started praying for God to change my heart on adoption, and I didn't really. She wasn't praying that with me. But anyway, all of a sudden, I had to change her heart. We were getting ready to build a new home. It was going to be our retirement home. It was a 3-2 home, and she wanted to bring these kids into our home. And the way I told her, you'll love this. The way I told her is that we went to brunch one day after church. And I'd talked to my pastor and everything, and the guy said, okay, yes, God, okay, I'm in. And so we're sitting down at brunch, and I looked at it, I said, hon, because I designed the house and on the GC of the house and love doing that. But I said, hon, I got to tell you, I said, I'm going to redesign the house. And she looked at me with her perplexed face because she knows me well. She goes, what are you up to now? Why? I said, well, I don't know. I mean, if you're going to have extra kids in the house, I think we need a bigger house.
Oh, that can be
She
chilled.
just started bawling. Getting up and saying, she's happy. She's happy. It's okay. So that's how we did it. And we've been embarking upon that to bring children into our home. Once you get involved in that, and I have seen it, there's such a need. Just in our Pinellas County, which is a big, probably 10 million people in Pinellas County, Florida here, there's over 4,000 children in a foster system and only 700 beds capacity.
Crazy.
There's so many kids for adoption. So yeah, it's just another thing. There's a gap, and say yes, and let's go.
I love that you are involved in the foster care space. Well, first of all, I think Rebecca would agree with me that you're making 70, 67, 70 look like the new 37, 40.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's number one. Number two is that I receive this, I'm involved with the American Society for the Positive Care of Children, and I receive all of the information about, what's going on with the foster care system in every state. And, I literally read through it every month that I receive it. And it's just heartbreaking. So I give such kudos to you and your wife. And also, my younger son is, I'll say, quasi adopted, right? We raised him from another family member who really wasn't equipped to raise him. And there's something about giving back in that space. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I'm so glad that you bring God into the workplace and that you place him first, because I think we don't do that enough. It's almost like I've met people who are uncomfortable putting God first. And it's so important because you know what happens when we don't put God first, right? And we can resist it and argue about it. But I guess getting back to the franchise world. So what is it that you do that is, what I understand, very unique and different that helps franchises scale?
Well, I started off my previous success. I created a system all around unit level performance. I really don't go on average unit volume because average unit volume is so skewed by the top performers. And so we got a hockey stick, so we got all of a sudden I got this bin there. I got big volume from 10 of my franchises or 10% of my franchisees. If I take them away, then my average unit volume isn't very good. And so when I got into the franchise world, I brought some other business management and I said, well, how come these franchisees aren't being successful? How come they're not hitting the numbers? And so what I just started with was establishing a 1-year benchmark of success of defining the business model that the founder created and is working. They know this, they just don't do it most of the time, and say, okay, if the franchise comes in day one, a year later, they should be at this benchmark pace of this benchmark of success. Your business model. What is that? And so I get them to define that. We define that, and then we get everything aligned. It's this typical, I'm a big fan of EOS. I'm sure we'll draw some of that in. And I created FOS for the franchising world, franchise operating system. But we always start with the end in mind. And then we start executing and driving to that. We start off by making sure we bring in the right people to our franchise system, and we start training them right, and we get them to, we can hold them accountable. But none of that works unless I have that end goal for the first operational year to establish that foundation of success that sets them up for the second year of scaling. Scale to get better, or you scale to get bigger. So let's razor focused on that. Now, some of the franchisees could do really good. The top performers could hit that benchmark in 6 months. Great, pass the baton, go scale. But so I created that, and I created what I call unit level success ratio. And so if I start with 10 franchisees day one, a year later, I need to be able to have, I factor at about 75 to 80% success ratio of getting those franchisees to that benchmark. Nobody measures that. So that's my main component of measurement. That sounds real easy, but then my whole system is coaching the leadership team of the franchisor and how to go down. And one thing, Rebecca, you and I've talked about this. I'll just throw this in here. One of the passions that I have is to stop the reactive conversations that FBC, the franchise business coaches, having with the franchisees. Because we're talking about then what didn't happen. Where I turn everything around by measuring scorecards and everything else to leading indicators, I want to have proactive and active conversations all along the way to make sure that we're coaching them to hit the numbers. Because if I wait to see P&L, it's too late. If I wait to see some of these other numbers, it's too late. It's already happened.
Yeah.
And it makes the franchisee feel real bad because I'm always going in being the mean uncle or the sheriff that's saying, well, look at the numbers you didn't hit again.
Right. You may not know, Gerry, but I was a field consultant, or what was called a business consultant director, the very large franchisor a number of years ago. And what you've described is exactly what I was trained in, which was basically to encourage more compliance and to point out issues, and I wasn't seen as someone that could really get people to that next level. By default, oftentimes they did, and because I was an entrepreneur before, I was able to bring some of that but as a, the training I received from this company was not really something that was super helpful to me in working with my franchisors. I never got a document that says this is where they need to be, at 1 year, 2 year. Here are the 17 things that need to get in place to make that happen. Here's how you can coach well to help that franchisor. I never received any of that kind of training or even knew how to implement that. So this FOS system that you have sounds like takes care of that at all levels, at the ZOR level as well as the franchise coach.
It's seamless. So why would, if the franchisor is ready for the traction tools, why can't we do that with the franchisees? Why don't the franchisees have 9? So let me clarify. I have the end in mind. I have that benchmark. Well, then to hit that benchmark at 9-month mark, I got to be here to be able to hit the year.
Right.
I got to be here at the 6-month mark to hit the 9-month. I got to be here at the 3-month mark to hit that. Then I start with week 1. Week 1, week 2, week 3, then I come back the other way and lead and coach and nurture. Hey, when you first start, your closing ratio is going to only be, like probably 20%, 15, 20%. Our benchmark is 40%, but don't worry, we're going to get you there. But here's how we're going to do it. Now, by what time should your business model, should they be at week 4 and week 5? So that goal is at, say, for example, at the 90-day mark, my closing ratio should be here. Because I think that's important in sales and getting them up and going. The pace we start them at is the pace they're going to finish at. But we do that every step of the way and model that out and measure week 1, week 2. Then we can transfer. It's just all the same traction type tools that we just bring down through the FBCs, and it's all done by the numbers. I want to teach the franchisees how to be good operators. I don't spend much time on training. I'll probably get in trouble for this. Franchisees how to read a P&L. On they can. It's important in a balance sheet. That is. But I got to know how to hit my numbers as a good operator of this business model. If I do this, this, and this, I'll hit the revenue that I need for the month.
Yeah.
Do this, and this in my labor control and control my cost of labor and materials, I'll hit this margin.
It's almost like learning. I'm thinking the picture I'm getting is I'm not going to learn trigonometry until I know how to add and to multiply and divide and understand geometry. There's this process. And you're breaking it down into things that a franchisee can learn, or franchisor if you're working at the franchisor level with the FOS. It's steps, and I master this, and if I do this well, then the next step and the next step, which leads me to being a physicist at some point, right? But I'm not a physicist coming out of the chute, right? I think the analogy that you gave us earlier was the building of a house kind of idea, right? We don't just voila have a castle rather. I don't know what a castle is, but a castle there's a process to make that happen.
Well, and I got to go through inspections. So I got to have I live in Florida. And so I got to pass 145-mile-an-hour wind tests, and I got to have all these anchors and everything else. But I can't go forward until I have proven proficiency and got that done. They come in and say, check, good, check, good. Now you can go put your mechanicals in. Now you can go put your roof on. Now you can do this. I got to do it that way. I think it's funny that you brought up that analogy, because what I am known for, and it's kind of funny too, and I don't know how this happened, but when I get involved in systems, they either call me Jer Bear or Uncle Jer or Uncle Jerry. And so they're franchisees. It's kind of a thing. But I tell them, and they come up with the Uncle Jerry isms, the quotes and stuff. But I say, listen, you've got to start out at kindergarten. Then we take them to grade school. Then we take them to high school. And then we take them to collegiate, then PhD. You're exactly right. We got to do that methodically, instead of just like, okay, hey, we got your money. We're going to train you. See you later. Bye. Bless you, my son. You are now a franchisee. Go forth and be fruitful and multiply. See ya.
Boom.
And then I'm going to come in next month or so and tell you about everything that you're doing wrong.
Yeah.
At least the nickname is endearing.
I know. I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
So, what are some of the things, Gerry, that the franchisees need to know or need to work on? Is it the accountability? Is it the discipline? Is it something specific like the marketing? Like, what are the area? What are those benchmarks? What does this look like?
Well, let's look at, they're buying into your business model,
Okay.
that you have these systems. That so like the what we do is pretty prevalent out there. It's pretty easy to teach people what to do. When I was in the commercial cleaning thing space with Office Pride, it was pretty easy to train people how to clean, right? The trick is how do we teach them to be successful? So the vast majority of people, I kind of specialize, not kind of, I specialize in the service based vertical. And the funny thing is that the vast majority of people coming into the system have never been in sales.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And Rebecca, we do that, and through Zorko and everything else, is like, okay, well, we've talked about it, it's like, well, okay, well, you got to be in sales. When I go and look at training and most service-based curriculum, guess how much of a percentage of time is spent on sales training? 10%, 10, 15%.
Mm-hmm.
Or they say, well, just do what I do. So we got to train them how to do this. So we got to look at this and saying, most people have never been in financial management, business management. So we got to get good at leading them through. We got to start at kindergarten, but why don't we start saying, well, here's how you sell, and recognize that we're going to have to walk with these people for 90 days to get them proficient at selling.
Mm-hmm.
One of my clients just did this, and the training manager, and what we do, Launch to Growth, is that we have specific coaches that are assigned to these franchisees for their first year.
Mm-hmm.
Period. Then they get the pass, and once they get that foundation, the baton is passed to the FBCs for scaling. So she was so happy. She emailed me and the rest of the team, and she goes, "Look at these numbers. When we just started the new program, they started 12 franchisees on their new 12-week program." And she goes, man, look at the first month, it was only 15% closing ratio. And she had the screenshot of those 12, because we have a benchmarking system, and I'll know all the numbers, 36%.
Wow.
Never happened before.
Nice.
Never happened before. And it's like, because we got focused, that we realized, sometimes the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And if I got to start building a business, I got to be able to sell. I got to bring business in. I got to do this. I got to do this. Well, we just got to walk them through that methodology, if you will. It's just leading them, coaching them, nurturing them, because they paid my franchise fee. I'm supposed to have all that for them. You mentioned accountability. I trained franchise leadership teams in FBC how to nicely hold the franchisees accountable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what? I got to first hold myself accountable
Mm-hmm.
to be able to hold them accountable.
Yeah. As you're talking, I'm thinking about the franchisor and everything that's on their plate.
Mm-hmm.
And if you came into my office as a franchisor, I'd be curious how you find that main thing that you're talking about. Is there kind of a standard? Every franchisor has these 7 things, let's call them pillars, and we address each of them. Is there an auditing process you go through? Are you looking again like you do with children and with your men's ministry? Are you looking for the gaps and filling those gaps first? What's that process of assessing where a franchisor is and what is the main thing that has to be dealt with?
It's always the same. I've gotten so good at this. I'm never surprised by what I go in. It's just how I approach it. My methodology is I start with, people ask me who my ideal customer is, and I say it's a CEO founder that I can get to see that they need to do things differently, and that they need help, and they need to restructure, and they need to, that's where FOS comes in. But to get there, I could go in and I could say, okay, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. That doesn't work. Okay. So I get them to have the aha moment, and I start with asking them, if I start your franchise on day one, what is your benchmark of success at that pace of at the 12-month mark? The vast majority do not have that. I'm working with a very large franchise system right now. They've been in business forever and doing it. They didn't have it. The old me, where God hasn't fixed some of my tactfulness, then I'd ask, well, what are you coaching to then? You know, so, but I don't. So they say, okay, what would it be? And they tell me. And I say, okay, great. Now, just like I walked before, if I start with 10 and I've brought in the right people, shameless plug for Zora, go get, but I bring it. That's why it's so important. Bring in the right person to your system to know what you're doing. And I got my training right. I got my ongoing support and coaching. Training is training, coaching is coaching. Okay. And I do that, and the franchisee does everything. I'm good at holding them accountable, and they do everything. I should have a pretty high success rate of getting them there. And I ask them if it happens, and they always say 100% or 90%. And I said, nah. I said, you're still going to slip. You're going to do sometimes bring in the wrong. But could I get you to buy 75%? And they say, yeah. And I say, okay. Your item 19 always focuses on being in business a year or more. So you gave me that new benchmark. This is what your business model should do. It's very well defined. Now, let's go look in your system and see how many that have been in a year or more in your franchise system are hitting those numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Invariably, sometimes I get surprised, but most of the time it's a 20 or 30% number. The first customer I ever did it with when I started my own practice almost 3 years ago was 4.75%. And this is a funny story. So I'm looking at the CEO and I told him this, and he looks at me and goes, well, we have to change the benchmark. And I started laughing. And then I looked at his face and I said, oh, you're serious? I said, oh, well, let's change the benchmark. What do you want to change? We'll drop it 25%. It moved the needle almost to 8%. I said, now, this is the problem. So to answer your question, Rebecca, we know what the gaps are then.
Mm-hmm.
I just say, okay, well, let's start. If I go to the doctor and I do my general checkup, he starts with my blood pressure. I don't know what he starts with, but I mean, checks my blood. I do my blood test now since I'm elderly, quite frequently. And, my cholesterol's fine. If it wasn't, he'd dig into it. He was there. But it's always the same. I can dial it in and say, well, let's go look at what it is. Now, the key thing to that is where most emerging brands, early stage emerging brands, and again, I don't buy into the 100-unit thing. I got some of my clients that I caught them early enough, they're royalty self-sufficient at 30 units.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't buy into that 100-unit thing. It's flawed data. Anyway, I can go in and say, all right, well, let's look at your numbers. Because they're all bootstrapping, they're all tight on money, they don't have money to invest. I said, well, here's my plan. Well, how am I going to pay for that? Well, if you move the needle from 20%, then let's just say we move it to 50% in the first year. I got a number then that I can show the CEO and say, well, here's your number. And then I got plenty of people to tell them and give them references and stuff that it can be done. And there are good systems out there that have done this and grown and done it well. But as we know, the vast majority don't.
Yes. I really like this reverse engineering process that you have. It's that end in mind process that says this is where they should be at 1 year. If we can get them launched correctly, then they're going to scale, right? And so where do we need them at 1 year? And what are the things that they need to learn or do to be able to get
starting with week 1, week 2,
with week 1,
week 3, week 4, boom. Where am I going? Boom.
Tracy, what I was thinking there was the confidence that builds in that business owner, because their skill sets and their knowledge is growing week after week after week, rather than deep end of the pool, I'm throwing them out there to do their thing.
But think about this too. You talk about the confidence building. Think how this world changes for the FBC.
Mm-hmm.
Now our meetings are, hey, good job. Hey man, hey, you're off a little bit. Let's adjust now. Let's do that. And I'm moving it right. I'm not, too often it's like, well, great, you're just telling me once again how bad I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Well, you got to get your numbers up. See ya.
Mm-hmm.
But even that increases morale, self-esteem is high, morale is high. Then you have raving fans. Then you have
also like Scott Greenberg. Scott Greenberg says very well. I love his mindset model, mindset skill set model. And just to get this in, I love David Barr. I love hearing him speak whenever I can. And one thing that always strikes me, he says this so well, and he's preaching this. Your system needs to be built around making the average franchisee successful.
That's great.
That brings the bar up.
You can't look at your top performer. That's what I hate about average unit volume. You need to get rid of that. Then show me what your average unit volume. It means nothing. Unit level success ratio. I have my benchmark. How good am I as a franchisor at leading these people there? I got a grading. Think of my whole operational support team had those benchmarks of success that we made, and they took ownership of those numbers. It's a different game. It's a different game.
Which goes back to that accountability factor, but also empowering the franchisor, the coaches in field working with those franchisees to take these baby steps together, because once we have that foundation, we can build off of that. So we need to wrap, but I have one kind of last question, and it's a personal question. So Gerry, what is your biggest fear? I think you've hit on it numerous times. And if I'm putting words in your mouth, please correct me. But it seems like you really are passionate about making sure no one fails, right? That man that's going to be a great husband, is going to be a great father. You don't want him to fail. The children that are in these foster care and at risk, you don't want them to fail. And I also see kind of the same thing with an emerging franchisor. Let's get them launched correctly so they can build. You don't want them to fail. And the same way with the franchisees. So if I'm putting words in your mouth, correct me. What is your biggest fear that seems to be driving your biggest purpose or your biggest?
I really don't have that fear. I have a strong faith. I can do all things through him who strengthens me, so, I have my mainstay verses. I think what I've learned, and by the way, I'm a big Dan Sullivan fan too. And he's got this thing he does, how I'm going to live to 156. I picked my number. I'm going to live to 124. Okay.
There you go.
I'm just about halfway there, so I got plenty left. I'm going to run the bases of life. Around the bases, I'm going to slide into the home plate of heaven, dust a flying. Okay, I'm not sliding, but my drive is knowing how God has equipped me to do what he wants me to do, and to keep him front and center in all that I do. And then I'm just obedient. When I look at the children, it doesn't have to be that way. When I look at franchisors, it doesn't have to be this way. We talk about this year after year after year in our IFA survey, everything. And that's why we created Zork Forum, by the way, with Stan Friedman and I and John Francis and others, it needs to be fixed. It doesn't have to be the way it is. So I just let's just fix it. I'm the gap figure. Here's the program to fix it. All right. Here's what we do with children. Well, let's just all adopt. It's real simple. Let's just all go adopt some kids. Let's do this. Let's fix this. It doesn't have to be this way. Working with the men. God doesn't want you to suffer. Let's get your heart right with God, and everything else falls into place.
That's great.
Wow.
I hope that answers it. I hate to
It does. You
you
really
have some
beautifully
fears.
reframe that. You beautifully reframe that. It's actually a title of a book. It doesn't have to be that way. It's a
Now,
title
when
of a
I
book.
do have fear, the Bible tells me to cast my anxieties on him because he cares for me.
Yeah.
So I spend time and okay, God, okay, Holy Spirit, I'm scared. I got some fear here. And get me through it because it's just natural to have that.
Yeah.
But well, I turn it over, I get it to God, I go through this, and off we go.
Yeah.
So,
That success mindset. Yeah.
yeah. So, Gerry, how do people learn more about Launch to Growth and Gerry Henley and Zor Forum and FOS? How do we learn more?
They can reach out to me. My website is launch2togrowth.com. So it's GROWTH. So launch2growth.com. I'm Gerry with a G at launch2growth.com is the email. LinkedIn, everything's on there. And my past, I got some great testimonial videos on my website. I've been working on testimonial videos. Contact me personally. All my contact info is on my LinkedIn profile, on my website. Just reach out, and I always do my wellness checkups. I used to call them assessments, but that just it's like, so I do a wellness checkup. I always do that for free.
Perfect.
So
Perfect.
when I go in and do this, I do that wellness checkup for free because I know what I'm going to find. I know what it is. And then if it's a good fit, we start working together.
That is a no-brainer to take that wellness checkup. That is a no-brainer. Yeah.
That happens pretty quick. I just talked to a potential client yesterday. He goes, how long is it going to take? I said, I don't want to do it face to face. I need to be face to face with you too, as the leadership. And I said, you know what? In 4 hours, we'll be done and we'll know what the plan will be. It's pretty simple.
Boom.
Then we go to work.
4 hours well spent. Tracy, in your corner, you are the best at wrap ups. I tell you, I know I always put that on your shoulders, but you really are incredible at it.
You. That makes me happy. I appreciate that, Rebecca. So Rebecca and Gerry with a G. I am taking away this whole concept of unit level success ratio. And it brings me back to that moment in school when I learned the difference between average and median.
Yeah.
Right. So I feel like I'm back in that moment again. So what I'm seeing is like, yeah, anybody can say that they're successful, but if only 1 or 2 people are carrying the weight of that success, then how successful are you? And I think that it's up to us to get the message out. And I think it's up to every franchise CEO, CFO to take a look at those numbers and to call you and Gerry and find out what the real story behind the story is. So thank you for being on the show. And Rebecca, you are just
a great pleasure. And as you know, I'm very passionate about this and I could talk forever on it. So let's do it again.
That we will do it again. Thank you again, Gerry. We appreciate you. And to those of you listening in today to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, which is what we talked about today, and relationships forged. We'll see you next week on another episode.
Thank you. Bye-bye.